Hello everyone, welcome to my Assassin's Creed Brotherhood 100% full sync walkthrough. This will cover all of the main missions in the game. So this will cover all of Sequence 1 through Sequence 9, and I will also cover the Da Vinci disappearance as well, because that technically is classed as a main sequence, because of how much it actually contributes to the story of Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, and it just really feels like a main sequence, so that's why I'm not going to ignore it. So, you might be wondering why I'm doing a walkthrough of Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. Well, it's because I've been wanting to do something other than Resident Evil for a while. I mean, I know I have been doing that with A Plague Tale Requiem and the Callisto Protocol. A Plague Tale Requiem is a fantastic game, while the Callisto Protocol is a very shallow mess of a game. I mean, admittedly, there are times when it's better than Dead Space 1, but it's still a pretty shoddy game. So, yes, I have been focusing on games other than Resident Evil, but I just wanted to do it again, especially since my friend did a live stream of Assassin's Creed Brotherhood that was very enjoyable to watch, and he covered certain missions and the full sync objectives specific to those missions. So this is what gave me inspiration to do this 100% sync walkthrough of Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. And I might do the side activities as well if I ever feel like I have the urge to do so, but that remains to be seen by the end of this very lengthy video I'm making for this game. So, what do you need to know about this game? Well, this is actually the very first Assassin's Creed game that I ever played, and I didn't even buy it at my own urging. My family got it for me. I don't remember the reasons why they bought this game for me, but they bought it, and I was initially reluctant to play it, but when I actually got into the game, I pretty much couldn't stop playing this game. It's such a fantastic game. I mean, admittedly, Assassin's Creed Revelations is my favorite of the Assassin's Creed games, and it's my favorite of the Ezio trilogy. But Brotherhood is probably my second favorite Assassin's Creed game. And then beforehand, it's probably Assassin's Creed 2 or Assassin's Creed 4, although with the focus on Ezio Auditore in Assassin's Creed 2, maybe that's why it's my third favorite game instead of Assassin's Creed 4. But, yeah, I have a history with Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, which is another reason why I decided to do a 100% full sync walkthrough of this game. And it's very interesting that I'm doing a walkthrough of Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, given the pitiful state of Assassin's Creed at this point, because Ubisoft as a company has just really broken down in their leadership, because Yves Guillemot, the main head of Ubisoft, is driving the company into an iceberg pretty much, just like the Titanic. And if you don't know the state of Ubisoft at this point, Ubisoft has become a company worse than EA with their greedy business practices, just their toxic work environments, the way they discriminate against genders, the number of delayed and canceled games. I mean, they've had 7 games so far canceled for this year. And then one of their games, Skull and Bones, has been in development hell for 10 years at this point, and they can't stop that game because they apparently made a deal with the Singaporean government to keep this game active, which I've never heard of a game developer making a deal with a government to keep a game intact. And it has put Ubisoft in a very tough spot. Not only that, but Ubisoft is at the point where they're busy chasing trends rather than actually defining trends of their own. Like, Assassin's Creed back in the Ezio trilogy defined a console trend with, like, open world games and just being able to climb buildings, and also experience masterful storytelling through a connected storyline that spans multiple games. And that's what allowed Assassin's Creed to define a generation, but they don't do that anymore. And the Ubisoft employees have been thrown under the bus by this really shit leader, Yves Guillemot. He has said that everything that has been happening in the company is the fault of the employees, even though they have been giving everything that they've had to this company, and they've been working for very minimal wage. The salaries just aren't keeping up with inflation, and they have been the victims of very toxic work environments for almost a decade at this point, maybe even longer than that. And Yves Guillemot has done nothing as a leader to fix the problems that have been occurring with Ubisoft. And he's also been... Well, I mean, he's using more passive deception, this and that, where he phrases his words in such a way where he seems like he understands, but he doesn't, and then he also answers the questions in a very strange manner. So it's clear that he's just trying to deflect blame. He doesn't want to handle all of the blame himself. He doesn't want to take responsibility for his actions at all. And this is the pitiful state that Ubisoft is in at this point, and it is absolutely pathetic. There is no fucking way you can excuse the appalling actions that Ubisoft has committed against their employees and against their fan base. And believe me guys, there's going to be a lot of talk about this when I get to later parts of this video, when they do decide to surface. But right now, I just want to focus on Assassin's Creed Brotherhood at the moment. So Assassin's Creed Brotherhood is the third game in the Assassin's Creed series. So directly after Assassin's Creed 1 and Assassin's Creed 2, it is a continuation of Ezio Auditore da Firenze, who is the character that I'm playing as right now from Assassin's Creed 2. So, Assassin's Creed, if you don't know, is a very unique series in that it basically tells a story between two timelines. So, it uses history, like the past, as one timeline, and then it also has the main timeline, which is the modern day. Although at this point, the modern day is in shambles, and Ubisoft has not done anything to really make the modern day good anymore, and the modern day is just going absolutely nowhere in their later games. But I digress. And Assassin's Creed Brotherhood has Desmond Miles, the main protagonist of the modern day, reliving his memories in order to achieve combat training and to also find a piece of Eden, which is essentially a device left behind by the ones who came before. Essentially, they're like proto-humans, pretty much. They're not exactly alien life forms. I mean, I think some people want to believe that the Isu, which are the names of the ones who came before, are alien life forms, but I'm pretty sure they're like the original race that were on Earth, and then they manufactured all humans. Like, it's a very interesting tale with the way they told the story in the Ezio trilogy. But they just completely did away with all of that in the comics and in the later games, and Assassin's Creed is just without focus. And like, what even is the story now for the modern day in the later games for Assassin's Creed? I mean, what is the landscape of the Assassin and Templar struggle? I mean, it just makes absolutely no sense at all what they're trying to do. And we're getting a new Assassin's Creed game soon, known as Assassin's Creed Mirage, where we're playing as an enemy-turned-ally, I guess, from Assassin's Creed Valhalla. And they're saying that they're bringing that game back to the roots of the series, and by roots of the series, they're wanting to favor like the whole narrative-driven action-adventure style, non-RPG design of the Ezio trilogy with Assassin's Creed Mirage, but I don't think that's entirely true. I mean, I'm still going to play Mirage. I mean, I am kind of looking forward to it, and my friend is not going to get it because he's done with Assassin's Creed, but at least I'll be able to show it to him when I do decide to get Assassin's Creed Mirage, and we can just do a blind playthrough and go over all the problems with that game, because I know there are going to be problems, and Lasers, the guy who is the titular Assassin's Creed YouTuber, knows exactly how Ubisoft behaves, so I'm pretty sure everything he's saying about Mirage will come true when the game actually releases. And they haven't even given an official release date for Assassin's Creed Mirage, and Ubisoft is already demanding pre-orders. They haven't shown any gameplay, they haven't shown any substantial trailers for Assassin's Creed Mirage. How can they already demand pre-orders for that game? That makes no fucking sense. And it just goes to show that's what they view their fans as. They view their fans as just money handlers, this and that, like people that they just can exploit money from in order to become more rich, this and that, even though Ubisoft is pretty rich at this point, but they just want more because they're a fucking greedy company, and it's just absolutely scummy. And every single appalling practice that I've discussed so far contributes to this greedy nature to Ubisoft, and EGMO is at the center of everything that is happening at Ubisoft. But again, I digress, and I'll talk more about this when I get the chance. But right now, we are in the modern day, so this is what I'm talking about. So like I said, Assassin's Creed tells a story between two timelines. So you have the past, which takes place during the Italian Renaissance, at least with Assassin's Creed 2, Brotherhood, and I think you could say the next game, Assassin's Creed Revelations, takes place in the Renaissance era. And then you have the modern day, which takes place in 2012. And this game series, at the time of the Ezio trilogy, for the modern day, they were going for a 2012 phenomenon story, only it's the single greatest 2012 story ever told about the end of the world. And the way they just tell it, and the way the 2012 phenomenon links to the ones who came before and to mankind as a whole, and just the way they use that as the driving force of the game for why Desmond is exploring these memories, for why he's exploring Ezio, for why he's learning to become an assassin. That is so clever in its writing. I mean, you don't get clever writing like this in any of the Assassin's Creed games after Assassin's Creed 4. And the series went on the wrong direction when Assassin's Creed 3 released, because Assassin's Creed 3 is where a lot of the direction and the leadership changed. And this ultimately caused Assassin's Creed to go on a downward spiral after Assassin's Creed 4, because Assassin's Creed 4 at least fixed some of the issues present with Assassin's Creed 3, and that's why that game is lauded by so many as being one of the greatest Assassin's Creed games ever made. And it does tell a really engaging story with Edward Kenway. But after that game, nothing that occurs in the Assassin's Creed series is substantial. The rest of the games after Assassin's Creed 4 may as well be non-canon or just feel like side games because they don't contribute to anything whatsoever. There's nothing that contributes to the Assassin versus Templar landscape. There's nothing that contributes to our understanding of the ones who came before / the Isu. In fact, Assassin's Creed Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla completely ruined the Isu entirely with the way they're portrayed. But I think I'll talk more about this point when I get to the later parts of this video. But that is the state of Assassin's Creed right now, and it wasn't like this at all when Brotherhood released. And as I was saying before with the modern day, right now we're playing as Desmond Miles. So Desmond Miles, he is trying to gain access to the Villa Auditore, which was the location that you went to in Assassin's Creed 2, and this location is inside of Monteriggioni, which is where we are right now. We're underneath Monteriggioni trying to gain access to the Assassin Sanctuary, so we're just doing some minor platforming, and we're getting some banter between Desmond and Lucy. And apparently, Lucy's a Templar, even though it makes absolutely no sense with the way her character is portrayed in Assassin's Creed 2 and Brotherhood. The reason why they made Lucy a Templar is not for a good reason. It's because the actress, Kristen Bell, wanted more royalty payments for her role as Lucy. But the creative director at the time, Patrice Désilets, didn't want to pay Kristen Bell, so he fired her and completely killed off her character and just arbitrarily made Lucy a Templar, even though it makes absolutely no sense. And they reserve this specific piece of information about Lucy being a Templar inside of a paid DLC for Assassin's Creed Revelations, and it was apparently like $15 to buy this DLC. So why the hell would you put a plot-centric story device inside of a paid DLC? You should not make paid DLCs an important factor to consider when trying to understand the main story. That's really stupid. And when you look at Lucy's behavior in Assassin's Creed 2 and Brotherhood, it doesn't fall in line with her being a Templar. And Lucy's personality in Brotherhood, I'm not focusing on the fact that she is apparently a Templar. I do find it interesting how Lucy goes from being like a very nose to the grindstone, very serious person from Assassin's Creed 2, and she's telling jokes, and she's actually like having some banter talk with Desmond and the other characters during Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. I wonder what contributed to this change. Maybe it's just Desmond Miles and his progress throughout Assassin's Creed 2 and Brotherhood, and just the way he consoles Lucy all the time and just makes her not give up hope. Maybe that's what allowed Lucy to develop more of a lighter personality in Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. I think that's the possible explanation for it. Like, stuff like that I can understand, but you can just tell that the whole idea of Lucy being a Templar was just shoehorned in because of the fact that they had to accommodate for Patrice Désilets firing Kristen Bell over something so stupid as royalty payments. I really don't understand that. But right now we're trying to find these power boxes throughout Monteriggioni. You can easily find them using Eagle Vision, and if you've memorized the path, you can just find them without that. And once you've done this mini objective, you'll be able to get back inside of the Animus, which is the device that allows the user to experience the memories of his ancestors. And they changed this design in the later games so that the Animus was a little bit more practical and you didn't have to waste time looking at the genetic memories of the specific user in order to view the memories you want. I don't really know like what specifically they changed because like the lore of the Animus is just all over the place with the later games, and like it was even more absurd in Assassin's Creed Origins and Odyssey because somehow using the memories of Bayek of Siwa, the Animus is somehow able to generate locations that Bayek has never seen before, and also, for some reason, the later games treat the Animus as if it's a simulation. Like, everything you're seeing right now is a simulation when it's not. Because a simulation implies that everything that's occurring right now is what you are manipulating as the user of the Animus, but that's not true. And the only reason it even comes across like you're actually manipulating the world around you is it's meant to be allow the user to synchronize with everything that's happening and that they don't lose any sense of synchronization with their ancestor. Like, it's a fooling mechanism. It's a placebo mechanism, basically. So, like, the user believes that they are actually controlling the ancestor right now, and this belief in control, in the fact that they feel like they are controlling the ancestor, is what allows the mind to be more active, and this is what allows the mind to allow the user to synchronize with the ancestor. It sounds complicated, but it's not that complicated. Although there are times when the Assassin's Creed games go against this very idea of how the Animus works specifically, and it's pretty dumb. And you can probably excuse that to just, oh, it's the gameplay elements, like everything that occurs in our eyes is very different to how the protagonists in the game actually perceive the Animus and everything that's happening within it. So that's the explanation that I use for that. Ooh, and also we've just done some missions, so that one you had to not lose any health, and this one you have to kill Ilka Nefice using the Hidden Blade. So this is with the air assassination, and we move on to here. I've left in this cutscene because this is Niccolo Machiavelli, and Machiavelli was actually a real person in our world, and he's an assassin. And for some reason, I don't understand what they did with Machiavelli in Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, but for some reason, he's very secretive towards Ezio in this part. Like, Ezio tells Machiavelli that he thought he sent for him when he reached Roma, but Machiavelli says never. But that's not true, because Machiavelli did get Ezio to Rome, so I don't understand. And he confirms this in sequence 8. So, like, why was he so secret? Like, why did he have to be so secretive about that? I don't get it. And Machiavelli's secretive nature and the fact that La Volpe, for some reason, thinks that Machiavelli is a traitor, I've never understood that with this game. It really doesn't make any sense with the portrayal. I don't know what they were trying to go for with that. I mean, I know this game is very masterful in its storytelling, but stuff like that is just a little confusing. But we've just done this memory right here, so this one you have to throw the Borgia captain into the scaffold in order to contribute to full sync. And this mission serves as an introduction to the Borgia Tower mechanic, which is basically you free certain districts of the map by taking out the Borgia captains and their respective towers. It's a really engaging process, and it's a really cool idea as a side activity. And the Borgia towers can actually play a role in your progress in the main story because they create restricted areas, and restricted areas are red zones on the map that you're not allowed to be in because the guards will be more alerted to your presence. And if you're inside of them, the guards will be able to see you. They will recognize you as someone as suspicious, and so you have to break line of sight with them. And this factor can be something you have to deal with when you're going through the main story, which is interesting that side activities can play a role in your progress in the main story. But this one right here, I believe you have to not take any damage, which I don't see how you're going to take damage during this mission. They try to keep the full sync objectives very simple for these later missions, just so you get used to them. And then we transition over to this next memory right here, where we have to catch the Borgia carrier in under 1 minute for the full sync objective after we've killed these guys right here. So whenever the enemies are on horseback, if you hold out your sword and you lock onto them and you hold the block button, Ezio will be able to knock over the horse whenever the guard tries to charge at him. For some reason, you have to purchase an upgrade for this in Assassin's Creed Origins, which is so fucking retarded. I don't understand why developers do this with RPG games, but they lock fundamental basic skills behind skill tree systems just to give the illusion of progress. And hiding the ability to just trip over enemies when they're on horseback is such a stupid way to contribute to an upgrade system, to give the illusion that you're contributing to progress. And that's one of the main reasons why Assassin's Creed Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla are the weakest entries in the Assassin's Creed series. But this memory right here, we just take out these followers of Romulus. I believe you have to not take any damage. And then this one, you have to beat this memory in under 8 minutes. And this is a parkour-centric mission, which is cool because the parkour system in the Ezio trilogy is the best the parkour has been. A lot of people will say that after Assassin's Creed 3, the parkour system got a lot better, but that's not true because the lack of player agency is heavily the case with the later games. And there's just not a lot of options and flexibility at your disposal with the parkour system, and doing like wall ejects or side ejects or any kind of advanced movement like that is almost impossible to do because of the way they changed the engine and the fact that they made the parkour system in the later games more animation focused, where you have to wait for the animation to finish before you're allowed control, rather than designing the parkour system with player agency in mind, where you have a lot more control at your disposal and the kind of motions that you do is entirely tailored towards your own inputs. And it's stuff like that that can make the parkour system very frustrating in the later games, and no more so is this really the case than with Unity, because I feel like Unity, a lot of the times the characters did whatever the hell they wanted, and you could not cancel a lot of the animation, so if you ended up overshooting like a wall jump or like a wall climb or anything like that, it was always going to get you into trouble. And they made the engine even worse in Assassin's Creed Origins and Odyssey and Valhalla, where parkour is just nothing but just holding up on the left analog stick, and that is about as bare bones and as mind-numbing as it can get with the parkour system. Like, it just becomes a very tedious process doing parkour in those games, and it's just mindless climbing pretty much. Whereas the Assassin's Creed games beforehand, they emphasized parkour as one of the core pillars of Assassin's Creed, and you're seeing the parkour system right now. I mean, it might not have like some of the more fancy animations that you see in the later games, but it is a damn sight better than how it controls in the later games. Fancy animations don't equate to player agency or player control, and that's what you got to realize about parkour in games. And you know, look at the handholds that I'm climbing right now. Look at the way they've designed the wall so that you know exactly where you're supposed to place your hand. You can tell that the character's actually grabbing onto something. Yet in Assassin's Creed Origins, Odyssey, and I believe in Valhalla as well, you can climb rocks that have no handholds on them, and it's like they're Spider-Manning their way up the wall. It just looks so fucking stupid, and it looks no more so stupid than in Assassin's Creed Odyssey's Fate of Atlantis DLC, because in the first episode of the Fate of Atlantis, you have buildings so high up off the ground because they're on these rocks, and you can see the character grabbing onto nothing and just Spider-Manning their way up the wall, and all you're doing is just holding up on the left analog stick, and it really becomes a draining experience at that point. Or when you go into episode 3 of the Fate of Atlantis for Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and you can grab onto buildings that have no handholds, and it still looks like they're just like Spider-Manning their way up this building. It looks so fucking stupid. I don't know what they did with that. You can just tell that a limited time and budget was put into Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and that's definitely something that measures up to how shit and poorly thought out Assassin's Creed Odyssey is. And Assassin's Creed Odyssey not only underwhelms the player with the way it just doesn't deliver on the core pillars of the Assassin's Creed series, but it also violates the lore as well. It introduces cheap shortcuts in storytelling. There is no care for the way they structured Assassin's Creed Odyssey. It's too funny just looking at it. And these mistakes that were made in Assassin's Creed Odyssey should have been avoidable, but Ubisoft still went with it because they just accepted the delusion that they were living with the Assassin's Creed series. I cannot believe any development team could be that fucking atrocious. And I have the right to say that just going through the shit I have to go through with Resident Evil Village's development team, because Resident Evil Village's development team is the single worst development team ever in the entire Resident Evil series. And apparently they're handling Resident Evil 4 Remake, same with the Resident Evil 2 Remake team. So like Division 1 of New Capcom is handling the remake of Resident Evil 4. And I expect the same level of stupidity in Resident Evil 4 Remake. But it's just, you don't expect that from like Capcom at this point. But like New Capcom has just been driving the Resident Evil series to a shallow end ever since Resident Evil 2 Remake came out. And with Ubisoft, however, you can always expect that level of shallowness with their gameplay because they haven't released a good game in almost a decade, and their games nowadays are just chasing trends, or they're RPG games, or they're just multiplayer games that just get very stale after like so little time. And like I played Rainbow Six Siege, and Rainbow Six Siege was pretty bad, and I know they have games like For Honor, and they have The Division, this and that, but they just look so cookie cutter in their interpretation and in their mechanics and everything like that. How the fuck can you just embrace that? Not to mention that they are the victims of microtransactions and all these other scummy practices that you get with multiplayer games nowadays, and that's why I just stay away from multiplayer games aside from Resident Evil Reverse. I mean, just, oh my god, like the state of Ubisoft at this point, it's just on a whole other level. You just don't get this with other game developers. Even developers like EA aren't on the same level as Ubisoft. Oh, and also right here, this is the next memory. This is the next sequence of the game. I believe this is sequence 3. So this one, you have to only kill the Borgia captain. It's a really simple full sync objective, and luckily for me, he did stumble into a bunch of enemies. So, yeah, there we go. And now we're just gotta make our way up to this Borgia tower. And right here, watch this. This right here is a problem with these guards. So these guards set up a checkpoint where basically they're just standing in one spot with their arms crossed, and they're just forming a barricade pretty much. Well, if you go behind them and you aren't blended or anything, regardless of what you do, they just immediately attack you because you're not meant to be anywhere near those kind of barricades, and it extends to behind them. So I have to make sure I don't kill these guys. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to exploit a hole in the system. So technically, I'm not laying a hand on these guys. They're just killing themselves because of the way the AI struggles with climbing on this game. So if you put yourself in a position where the AI is unable to climb up, they will be forced to drop down, and so you can bait them to kill themselves. It's always so funny. It's really hilarious when it happens. But now that they've killed themselves, I don't have any resistance, and I'm able to climb up this Borgia tower. And right there, I tried to jump sideways because this game didn't have the ability to actually fast climb horizontally. It wasn't until Assassin's Creed Syndicate that they gave you the ability to hold R2 and fast climb sideways. So instead, I'm just trying to speed it up by just jumping to the side and holding circle in order to grab onto the ledge. But he only grabs onto the ledge after jumping sideways at a very specific point in the animation. And so that's why there can be moments where you overshoot your jump and he doesn't grab. So you have to wait for the right moment after he jumps to the side to actually hold the circle button and actually grab onto the ledge. You can't grab it any sooner. It's a little weird. Like, we're almost up this Borgia tower, and I definitely recommend doing the Borgia towers if you're in the middle of doing full sync objectives. But in this recording, I didn't take out that many Borgia towers. I left a lot of them intact because I was trying to get through the main story as quickly as possible. Oh, I love this as well. This is one of my favorite things about Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. So, randomly, in certain parts of the city, you can get these bandit attacks. So these guys are bandits. And when they're about to attack you, they say a quote, and then they start to bum rush you. And then you just have to fight them and kill them. And they drop a lot of supplies. And it's that kind of stuff that I love in open world games, where something unexpected happens like that. And it's always entertaining when it happens. And it's such a shame that when you do one specific thief mission as a side mission in this game, you stop these bandit attacks from happening. And I kind of wish they didn't stop after you did that thief mission. I wish there was an option to just go into the menu and just turn on bandit attacks rather than having them be automatically removed when you do one specific thief mission where you have to kill the leaders of the Chento Oki. If they gave you that, I'd be very happy, because I love these kind of unexpected events in open world games. It kind of sucks that Revelations didn't really have anything like this, but I'm already so engaged with the open world after I beat the main story, which is how much I train my recruits up to Master Assassin, and I also send them on missions, and I'm being very strategic with where I send my assassins so that I don't lose control of the city. And it's just a really engaging process. I really feel like they improved the assassin recruit system in Revelations, but you obviously haven't been introduced to that mechanic yet, because we have to be introduced to it in Brotherhood at a later sequence, so I'll get to that when I get the chance. But right near this part of the mission, there is a Borgia tower, so I just decided to get rid of it because I just like doing these towers. And you saw me using my gun, so whenever you have your sword out, Ezio will automatically have his gun equipped as well. So you'll be able to hold square and use your gun that way. That's how I prefer to use my ranged weapons, because with the throwing knives, if you equip your dagger, Ezio will automatically equip throwing knives as well. So if you hold on the square button when you have your dagger out, you will throw daggers. Oh, look at this, another bandit attack. I don't think I've ever had bandit attacks occur in this kind of frequency when I'm going through the main story. And like I said, they only occur in very specific areas. And when you loot these guys, you get a fuck ton of resources. And as much as I do hate that the Chento Oki mission removes the bandit attacks entirely, it is the best mission for farming. Because in that mission, if you kill 2 out of the 3 leaders, and then you let the last Chento Oki leader get to his endpoint for his chase, it will queue an infinite spawn of these bandits. And if you stay on a building, you'll be able to eliminate the spawn that occurs. The next spawn will trigger, but they won't have time to see you while you're busy looting the body, because when enemies see you, they will stop you from looting bodies. And by doing that, you can amass so many resources from that one mission alone. That is the best way to farm for resources, and I'm amazed that no one else has discovered this exploit. I'm the only one who has actually covered that mission and showcased the exploit involving those infinite bandits, and that you can just repeatedly loot them and just get all the resources you need and so much money. And those resources also contribute to shop quests as well, and shop quests allow you to get very specific items if you have certain resources in your inventory. Also, this mission, you have to make sure you're not detected the entire time after you kill those guys, and you're eliminating notoriety. Also, I don't like the way Ezio phrases that line. He says, "or I can eliminate witnesses." That just seems too generalized a term, and it can be generalized to civilians as well. Whereas in Assassin's Creed 2, when Paola explains one of the methods for getting rid of notoriety, she says that you can eliminate false witnesses, those who have actually given up their honesty for coin, and their lives would not be mourned in the slightest. Like, that makes so much more sense, but I just feel like that's way too generalized a term that Ezio uses when he just says, "oh, I can just eliminate witnesses." That could have been phrased a little bit better. But now we're moving on to Sequence 4. So this mission will have us infiltrate the Castel Sant'Angelo, and you have to not be detected the entire time. This is pretty simple, and you go into the Castel Sant'Angelo for missions like 3 times. Once in Sequence 4, once in Sequence 8, and once in the Da Vinci disappearance. And somehow, they make infiltrating the Castel Sant'Angelo and escaping it feel different each time you do the missions. Like, this mission feels very different to what it's like infiltrating the Castel Sant'Angelo in Sequence 8 and the Da Vinci disappearance, and then the same can be applied to the other missions as well. And I think it's very intelligent the way they're able to use one environment that you go to repeatedly and make it feel different each time. And the same argument can be applied to enemy diversity as well. I mean, look at how much I discussed the molded in Resident Evil 7, for instance. I mean, a lot of people complain about the enemy diversity in Resident Evil 7, but I don't care because they managed to make the enemies that they had feel special and well designed, and they're used intelligently in their environments. And it always makes fighting the molded feel fresh every single time you deal with them as you go through the game. So it's the same exact case right here with the Castello Sant'Angelo, only, I mean, the enemy diversity thing is a little bit more impactful compared to the environment, but either way, this is still a really good idea for this game. And that right there, I was trying to use the throwing knives, but throwing knives on this game are pretty hard to use if the enemy is kind of going horizontal in relation to you. So I missed my throwing knife at least 2 times, and then I was finally able to get it, and he nearly spotted me. But this guy right here, he's walking towards me, so the throwing knife is less likely to miss. That's just the thing you got to deal with when it comes to projectile-based weaponry. Obviously, with hit scan-based weapons like the crossbow. Actually, no, the crossbow is a projectile-based weapon, but it has a faster rate compared to the throwing knives. That weapon is a lot more reliable than the throwing knives, even though the throwing knives can actually hit multiple enemies if you charge it. This is another reason why I always equip the dagger when I'm using throwing knives, because sometimes when I equip the throwing knives directly from the inventory and I hold square, sometimes Ezio doesn't do the charge. And this is a problem because when he charges, his throwing knives are always going to instantly kill the enemies. But if he doesn't, it doesn't always instantly kill the enemies. So you can get spotted, you can end up going into combat unnecessarily if you end up having this little problem. So that's why I always put the dagger on, rather than just equipping the throwing knives directly. But right here, I always get rid of the 2 crossbowmen, and then we're going to be able to climb up this side of the building right over here. And I love climbing the Castel Sant'Angelo. I mean, when you get up to the highest point in this game, which is the Castel Sant'Angelo, and you just stare out at the city, it's just breathtaking. I mean, you don't get this kind of experience anymore with Assassin's Creed. Climbing to the highest point in Assassin's Creed and staring out at the horizon, it just doesn't feel powerful anymore because of the choice of locations that they've opted for with the later Assassin's Creed games. I mean, how much the later Assassin's Creed games are shit, you're so focused on how shit they are rather than appreciating the vista that they've given to you. It's so disappointing that that is the case. But I've reached the limit on my recording, so I'll get back to you guys in a second. Okay guys, we're back, and we're still doing the same mission where we're infiltrating the Castel Sant'Angelo in order to rescue Caterina Sforza, a character from Assassin's Creed 2. And we're going through this nicely choreographed parkour sequence in order to scale the side of this building. And once we've gotten past some of the objective markers, and once we've killed a couple of enemies, we'll be able to complete this memory and continue on with the rest of Sequence 4, and also get to the other missions. But I think this is as good a time as any to talk about the full sync objectives in this game. I don't really know why the developers opted to put this in. I mean, I understand that they did it for additional replayability for this game, but I just find it very strange how they call them full sync objectives, because that wording implies that these objectives are supposed to be taken into account with the lore. And because they're supposed to be taken into account with the lore, it does pose a very strange question. How can you possibly relive an ancestor's memories incorrectly, like the way they didn't go through? I mean, Lasers, his explanation for this is Desmond is exhibiting more concentration and actually making sure he's reliving the memories perfectly, but that doesn't really make any sense to me. I would have much preferred they have the challenges in, but they didn't call them full sync objectives. And honestly, I'm the kind of person that didn't really like the idea of the full sync objectives, because I feel like they dilute creativity with the game. I feel like they force you to adhere to one specific playstyle rather than approaching these missions any way you want. I mean, sometimes it isn't so much of a problem. Like, you have the take no damage ones, or get these missions done in a certain amount of time. That's okay, but I feel like there are other full sync objectives that can be a little limiting and dilute player creativity and investment in the game. And I feel like it got worse as the games went on. I feel like in Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, the full sync objectives weren't so. Oh, watch this! Look at this! I've never seen this before. I didn't even know Lucrezia could even parkour her way up here. I mean, all the NPCs except for the Seekers and the Brutes are capable of doing parkour to a limited degree, but I didn't expect that from Lucrezia. But as I was saying, Brotherhood doesn't take the full sync objectives to a very egregious degree. I feel like it's when we get to Assassin's Creed 3 and the games afterwards that the full sync objectives kinda become a bit obnoxious and a little too limiting on the creativity. And I guess that measures up to how strange the direction was starting from Assassin's Creed 3 with where they wanted to take these Assassin's Creed games. You know, with Brotherhood and Revelations, it was... Actually, wait, no. Not Assassin's Creed 3. I think Revelations, with certain objectives, some of the full sync objectives were really awful. Like, there's one particular Templar agent mission in Assassin's Creed Revelations where you have to make sure this herald doesn't take any damage, and because of the paired animation nature to the combat and how the combat doesn't offer the best in terms of flexibility, every single time you're trying to defend the herald, you're trying to get Ezio to do an action, but he just refuses to do it because of the fact that he has to lock onto an enemy in combat, and then he has to like go through paired animation systems in order to engage with the combat. And the only chance you ever had of ever ensuring that the herald didn't take any damage was to use smoke bombs, because the other ranged weapons just weren't fast enough to stop the enemies from damaging him. And it's stuff like that that I feel the full sync objectives contribute towards. But, I mean, it can still work, you just gotta do it right, and I feel like Brotherhood was the one that got it right. But the other Assassin's Creed games, I mean, actually no, not with Revelations. I mean, yes, that one full sync objective was bad, but Revelations, I don't think it was as bad as I'm making it out to be. But Assassin's Creed 3, I feel, is where the full sync objectives got a little too egregious, and this translated into the other Assassin's Creed games later on. So that's the main point of contention I have with the full sync objectives in the Assassin's Creed game starting from Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. And I know that there's an article somewhere on the internet that talks about the full sync objectives, and the guy who made the article didn't like the full sync objectives in an almost similar manner to me. So I think it's a very valid criticism to pose against these Assassin's Creed games. I mean, they could have reserved these challenges for something else, or put in something a little bit different to add more Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. But I feel like the content is what gives Assassin's Creed Brotherhood a lot of the replayability. I mean, the full sync objectives, I don't really think they're the ones that add a lot of replayability. It's the content that Brotherhood provides, as well as the Revelations, that provides the replayability. Because I don't go back to the Assassin's Creed games just to replay the full sync objectives. I just go back to them because they're amazing games. Oh, and this actually brings me on to a tangent I like to discuss about some guy named Mark Alexei Cote. I don't remember what his role was with Assassin's Creed Syndicate and Odyssey. I think he was the creative director for both. Assassin's Creed Syndicate and Odyssey represent the weakest entries in the Assassin's Creed series by far. So take everything that Mark Alexei Cote says as if it's like poison. But I don't remember exactly where this information was or what the article was titled, but I believe he said that these short experiences like Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, Assassin's Creed 2, and Revelations, he said he doesn't like them as much compared to the live service model of Assassin's Creed Odyssey, where there's no definitive ending in sight, and so it's just there's so much content pumped out for the game. I don't remember what he specifically said. I mean, I think my friend will better understand what specifically he said. But that right there is just a very limited in scope perspective on Assassin's Creed, and just on games in general. Like, if you think you have to pump content out, like, so much for a game, just continuously, even if the content is of a very shoddy quality, that right there just represents a man who doesn't understand how games are supposed to be, and he doesn't understand the value of these kind of short linear experiences, and instead favors the model that Assassin's Creed Odyssey favored, where there isn't really a definitive ending to the game whatsoever, and so the experience is just dragged on for such a long time, and they're just pumping out mindless content after mindless content for the game, and that's what he views as being a better experience for a game compared to the short but sweet experiences that you get in Assassin's Creed 2, Brotherhood, and Revelations. And essentially, another way to phrase it is he views games as just a live service experience where you're just going to be like milking fans for money by just pumping out mindless content over and over again. And he just doesn't feel like these kind of short games ever have much replayability in the future. And I think in the article he quotes, we used to make games where people reached an end and they're like, oh well, I'll just go move on to something else. But when is that ever the case with gamers? I mean, I know sometimes it is, but that right there is just a very ignorant and foolish perspective on gaming and on gamers in general, if they think that is how the vast majority of gamers are, and that they will never come back to these kind of games. And they designed Odyssey to forcefully make people come back into the game, to just drag out the gameplay experience, because Odyssey is a grind and a tedious lesson in futility, just trying to go through that game. I mean, just based on what I've said, do you really think that is a better experience? Like, I cannot believe he said that. That's the kind of thing that you hear from some higher executive up in the company. Like, you know what Resident Evil 7? Apparently, with Resident Evil 7, the higher-ups originally planned for Resident Evil 7 to be a live service game with microtransactions. Oh, and also right here, this is a really stupid issue. So the full sync objective says that you're supposed to call an assassin in order to kill this guy. But even though I did call the assassin threw a throwing knife, and apparently that counts against you in the full sync. So if the assassin doesn't directly stab his hidden blade into the target, it will count against you in the full sync. So I had to restart that mission, which is dumb. But as I was saying, the higher-ups in Resident Evil 7 originally wanted Resident Evil 7 to be a live service game with microtransactions, and I think at some point it was going to have a multiplayer mode, but that was not what the gaming community wanted for Resident Evil 7, and that wasn't even what the developers wanted as well. And they nearly went with it, and so they had to repeatedly convince the higher-ups to give up on this foolish direction for Resident Evil 7, and it came true in the end, and Resident Evil 7 is the greatest Resident Evil game ever made. But this example I just listed is a great example of how disconnected the higher-ups in the company are from the gaming community, and Mark Alexei Cote, even though he was the creative director for Assassin's Creed Syndicate and for Odyssey, although I think he was actually a senior programmer for Assassin's Creed Odyssey, he just sounds like a higher up, and that should not be the case. How could he be that disconnected from the player base of Assassin's Creed? That's so fucking stupid. But we were just introduced to the Assassin recruit system, and we got the chance to use our recruits to kill off 2 Templars. The second Templar that you saw, I was able to demonstrate a technique called super blending, where you blend into a crowd, you then make Ezio go into some kind of climbing animation, or just have him hug a wall and then climb up, and then just before he returns back into a neutral state, you jump towards your horse and you just ride it. And essentially, I just gave myself infinite blending as long as I stay on the horse. And it's not just with the horse. It also works if you perch yourself on, like, railings of a bridge or on any kind of perch point that makes Ezio crouch. That's how that works. And it works in every single Ezio game because they didn't change the engine, although super blending is only ever useful in Brotherhood. I don't think super blending is that useful in Assassin's Creed 2 because, you know, like, Assassin's Creed 2 doesn't have horses, same with Revelations, and super blending will only work if the game detects that Ezio is not in some kind of neutral state of just standing on the ground or just running on the ground or anything. And horses can be taken into the cities in Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. So where super blending can be useful in Assassin's Creed 2 and Revelations, I have no idea. But right now we're being introduced to another side activity, which is Leonardo's war machines. And there are 4 of these war machines. There's the machine gun, which we're about to destroy right now. That's part of a main mission. There's the boat, there's the flying machine, and the tank. And the tank, the mission involving the tank, represents the hardest full sync mission ever in all of Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, but not for the reasons you think. It's just because taking damage inside of the tank is very easy to do when you're going up against the enemy tanks, and because Assassin's Creed Brotherhood doesn't have the ability to restart checkpoints, and if you fail a full sync, you have to restart the entire memory. That's what makes it annoying with that mission, so it's not hard for the right reasons, it's just annoying. Also, I'm going to skip out on this chase right here because you're just going to be chasing this thing and it's going to be shooting at you, but it doesn't kill you instantly. You can just heal yourself. It's very random if you take damage or not in that part, so that's why I just skipped ahead. And right here you can defend yourself, so pay attention to how the enemies are coming towards you on the map and just get in their way, because what happens is when you get in front of them, they'll just bash into the carriage and just kill themselves. The machine gun mission is one of my favorite missions in this game. And also, Ubisoft pretty much invented a mechanic before Resident Evil 6, which is the ability to trip enemies when you have an enemy run over another enemy. So, depending on how you shoot the horses, if you get one enemy to try to ride over another horse, they'll fall over and kill themselves. So it's essentially a tripping mechanic from Resident Evil 6, and Resident Evil 6 didn't release yet. It only released in 2012, whereas this game released in 2010. But it's cool to see this kind of mechanic in a game. So I feel like they should have designed the enemy spawns in such a way that you were going to be able to use that mechanic of tripping the enemies. Like, well, watch this, watch this. Oh, I missed it right there. Damn it. So I thought I was going to nail that trip right there. Oh, there. You see that? I don't think I shot the guy with the machine gun, but he hit the guy who got knocked over, and he ended up falling over. That right there is so cool. I love that kind of mechanic, that kind of believable, realistic mechanic. That could have made for some very interesting gameplay and very strategic gameplay in this part, where you pick correctly which enemy to shoot, and then he's able to take out his friend in the process by having his friend try to run over him in order to catch you. And I think right here you'll see some, like, watch this. Look at that. Oh, that's beautiful. I love seeing that. That is so fucking awesome. What a well-designed mechanic that is. And I did not expect that kind of mechanic to come from a developer other than Capcom. But the fact that Ubisoft did it right here, oh man, how far have they fallen from where they were previously with these games? They don't even have anything creative like that. And you don't get those kind of mechanics whatsoever in RPG games, and that just goes to show how diluted the creativity is. Look at that again, beautiful, love that. But the creativity in Assassin's Creed Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla is so diluted and just so washed out because of the RPG designs. I mean, in Valhalla, the RPG designs aren't so stressed upon you, although after some updates, I think they are a bit more stressed upon. But I still think Assassin's Creed Valhalla can still be played like it's an action-adventure game compared to an RPG game. And I think there are some mechanics that are befitting for an action-adventure game, but they don't work very well because the engine and the programming involved with Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla is not very good. And it really feels like amateurs designed those games. And Odyssey is the one that really shows more amateurish designs than anything else. Not just with the gameplay, but also with the writing, with the voice acting, with the way the animations are. I mean, just looking at the lead writer of Assassin's Creed Odyssey, she doesn't look like a professional whatsoever. She looks like she just recently got out of high school or something. And it really measures up to her inexperience, because, like, she was so bad at her job with making Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Like, that is easily one of the worst games I have ever seen or heard of, and how it came into existence in, I believe it was 2018 that game was released. How the hell does it pass off for a 2018 game? It feels more like a PS2 game, and there are far better PS2 games to play than Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I mean, what is this? I've never seen such shoddy quality like this from any other game ever. In Assassin's Creed Odyssey, I mean, a lot of people lambast Mass Effect Andromeda with its gameplay and with its animations and with everything like that. Moves it from its pedestal with being the single worst game ever made in all of existence. We have this mission. This mission gives a lot of people trouble because you're having to escort an ally through the open world environment, and the open world environment, of course, corresponding to the typical guard patrol paths that you see. So you have to pick your path correctly when going through this area and getting to these objective markers. So right here, hug the left-hand side so that you don't attract the attention of those guards right over there. And get to the objective marker here, and then turn around, and then go back the previous way, and use the courtesans to your advantage in order to get the guards out of the way. There are a couple of missions in this game where using the factions is a better choice. I do like that they stress upon the factions. I feel like in Assassin's Creed Revelations, the factions served no purpose whatsoever. There was never any incentive to use them, aside from moments where the game asked you to use them for like a full sync objective or something. Like, there was never really any need to use them, whereas in Assassin's Creed 2 and Brotherhood, there are definitely missions that benefit from the inclusion of these factions, and the courtesans are the most used faction in my case. The thieves take second place, and the mercenaries take last place. I never use the mercenaries. They're just a waste of time. I mean, you can blend with them so long as you haven't hired them, but they just waste time in the combat. There's no need to include them whatsoever. Whereas with the thieves and the courtesans, their primary protocol is to distract the guards. And so they're not engaging in combat. Like, the courtesans are busy flirting with the guards and drawing their attention away from you. And then the thieves, they steal money from the guards and force them to leave their posts. These two factions in the game. Also, right here, I'm going to use the courtesans right over here. Don't rush too quickly because there can be a guard patrol path right over here. Yeah, just try to go at it a little bit slower than me and just watch the red dots on the map carefully. So right now, I just need to wait for the courtesans to draw their attention. So as soon as they turn towards the courtesans, that's when I know I'm able to freely get past them. And we're able to finish this level. One of the hardest levels to do full sync for. And this one is just going to be a massive supercut of me just killing these crossbow men. Because it's just a tailing mission. So you just got to stay on the rooftops the entire time. And you'll be able to get the mission done effectively. And once we get over here, there's a guy with an arquebuser, and then there's also another crossbowman, so I'm just going to use my gun to take them out. And then after that, you'll be able to infiltrate the Pantheon from the roof, and you'll be able to air assassinate the guy and take his disguise. And it's all pretty simple. So during this time, I'm going to go on a different tangent. I'm going to talk about the Dead Space remake. So I am going to be playing Dead Space Remake on January 27th when it releases. And I was recently playing through Dead Space 1 and Dead Space 2 on the Xbox Series X, and I don't like Dead Space 1 at all. I think Dead Space 1 is a very boring game, and I don't like the control scheme. The control scheme I can understand for Resident Evil 4 because you don't have the ability to move and shoot at the same time, and so I understand that when you aim and press X, you reload, and like that makes a lot of sense, but like, Dead Space 1, you're able to move and shoot at the same time, and the controls just don't fit that whatsoever. And also, like, the enemies have so much life, and it really becomes quite a fatiguing experience just trying to get past the enemies. And they can be very bullshit because Isaac's animations are very slow, and they just rush you out of nowhere all the time. And it's just, at times, the enemy placements don't feel very intelligent, and I hate the laser sight on the plasma cutter. Why the hell would they favor a laser sight that is nowhere near as good as Resident Evil 4's laser sight? And the laser sight is just so dishonest in Dead Space 1 if the enemies are very close to you. When they're far away, the laser sight isn't so bad, but then you have those on-rail sequences, like the drag tentacle moments, or the moments where the hive mind grabs you. And you cannot see where you're pointing. If you had the reticle-based system from Dead Space 2, those moments would actually work. Like, the on-rail moments, slash, whatever those moments are called. I don't know the official terminology to describe those moments where control is taken away from you and you're just forced to aim and shoot your weapon, and those kind of sequences similar to on-rail sections. But those kind of sections work better in Dead Space 2 because the reticle system is able to counteract the camera issues involved with those sequences. But with the laser sight, you have to work alongside the camera, and when the camera is working in an unfavorable way, it just makes those sequences very frustrating. And I hope to God that they favor the reticle-based system, or at least give some way to toggle between the reticle and the laser-sighted systems, because I believe in Dead Space 2 and 3, you have the ability to swap between the reticle and laser-sighted systems. And if that's the case, that'll be great. And I hope to God that Dead Space Remake makes Kinesis good, because Kinesis is so shit. Dead Space 1's hitboxes are really bad, and Stasis has some really awkward hit detection as well. And it's just, I don't know why people say the pacing in Dead Space 1 is good. The pacing in Dead Space 1 just feels very sluggish, and even Seraphim 17 feels that Dead Space 1's pacing is sublime, and what the fuck is he talking about? And he made that really shitty walkthrough of Dead Space 1 recently, which just goes to show how burned out of a gamer he is. If he's going to be playing Dead Space 1 far below the baseline way to play it, and he says it's skillful, he says there's so much creativity, oh, he hates how modern games are so restrictive, this and that. He uses such strong words, like such pejorative words, like restrictive or anything like this. Like, why are you even thinking of games like this? I don't understand why you have to favor this kind of limited scope in thinking. And when I do my Knives Out video for Resident Evil Village and just continue it, I'm gonna shit all over Seraphim 17 with his run, because the Knives Out run is meant to shit all over knife-only players and people who just do stupid runs in general. And what Seraphim 17 did is pretty much a stupid run, and yet he considers it to be perfect and that the game is suitable for it. Yet if you see the methodology he's using, if you see how much he's just running all over the place or just moon bouncing, or he's just having to throw these objects repeatedly with kinesis just to kill the enemies, or when he's having to use some of the most bizarre strategies ever, how the fuck can you call that serviceable for the game? And it's like he's only doing it just so he's able to inflate his dick even more, just so he's able to get more of an orgasm from the experience, just like Tynard. Like, Seraphim 17 has turned into Tynard with his levels of stupidity and irrationality. I mean, he's just become the new Tynard, and I cannot watch Seraphim 17 anymore, because if I do, I feel like my IQ is being drained. And every time I hear those kinds of comments that Seraphim 17 says during his commentary, I just immediately dislike the video and save it for future reference for my Knives Out video series for Resident Evil Village. And I just cannot stand these kind of individuals anymore. And I used to be in their place, but when I saw the path I was going down, trying to embrace the same ideologies and beliefs that they are expressing right now, all it was doing was just leading me down the path to be a burned out gamer and a complete idiot, and someone who just doesn't feel very intelligent whatsoever, someone who just interprets games the wrong way. And I had to get away from that. And with where I am as a gamer, I have the right to denounce the actions and beliefs of all these individuals like Seraphim 17 and Tynard, because these actions and beliefs are just indicative of other underlying issues with themselves. And this is why I'm going to reserve this tangent for my Knives Out video and not discuss it right here, because I'm not in the right mindset to discuss that. But anyway, moving past the sheer retardation of Seraphim 17's beliefs and actions during his Dead Space walkthrough, I am going to look forward to Dead Space Remake when I do play that game and do my blind playthrough for it. And I will test it to see if plasma cutter only is possible, because the plasma cutter, using the plasma cutter only in Dead Space 1 and 2, it doesn't feel so impractical like doing Knives Out on Resident Evil Village, and I feel like it's a little weird the way you get other weapons in Dead Space 1 and 2, and whereas the plasma cutter is just introduced naturally. And this wasn't an issue with the Callisto Protocol, because the pistol and the riot gun are just introduced in a more natural, organic fashion compared to what it's like in Dead Space 1 and Dead Space 2. And also with doing plasma cutter only in Dead Space 1 and Dead Space 2, it afforded you a lot of flexibility with where you could allocate your resources, where you could upgrade your power nodes, and it's a pretty interesting experience going through that. That being said, whenever the enemy diversity and enemy arrangements don't feel complementary to that, like in Dead Space 1 and 2, or like mainly in Dead Space 3, because Dead Space 3 is regarded by many as having the worst enemy placements by far, and the enemy placements don't feel as intelligent because it just feels like you just throw enemy after enemy after enemy all the time with Dead Space 3. That being said, Dead Space 2 suffers from the same issue because I noticed this in Chapter 9 of that game where they just threw leapers at me constantly, or just the way they play certain enemies and they just spawn in like after some very strange actions. It doesn't feel very intelligent, and it can really cause Dead Space 2 to feel very fatiguing. But the good news is I don't succumb to this fatiguing effect too quickly with Dead Space 2 because I feel like the introduction and the first couple of chapters of Dead Space 2 are really fun, and they're a lot more bearable than the early chapters of Dead Space 1, and really like for most of the game, really. And I think I need to do a walkthrough of Dead Space 1 on the Xbox Series X when I get the chance. Although recording on Xbox Series X is a pain in the ass because the capture system that's built directly into the console is so shit, and you're limited to recording up to like 5 minutes worth of gameplay. And I don't know how to adjust the length on that, and the settings say that you have to adjust your storage capacity in order to have the ability to record longer video clips, but with how little the clips actually save correctly, it is a very tedious process, and it's very cumbersome to handle, which is why I have to discover another way to record Dead Space 1 on the Xbox Series X, and I think the capture system that I use for my PS3 can probably help with the Xbox Series X. So that's probably what I'm going to have to resort to when I do decide to record Dead Space 1. But when I do record it, I'm not going to have an enjoyable time because Dead Space 1 is so boring. But I'll lay off this tangent for now. Maybe I'll discuss it later on in this video. But right now we're on Sequence 6. So that first mission of Sequence 6, where we have to defend the barracks, you have to not take any damage. If you have smoke bombs, that mission is very easy. But if you don't, you're just going to have to wait for the right moment where there aren't any enemies around. And then this is one of my favorite missions in the game. And I decided to restrict myself for this particular mission. So this one, the full sync objective is you just have to not be detected, and you have to kill 20 of these French soldiers. And the way I'm going to restrict myself is I'm going to get nothing but hidden blade kills, except for the last couple of enemies because I just wanted it to be done. But I don't have the double hidden blades, and that's intentional because I wanted to go through this entire game without using the double hidden blades. I did purchase the Climb Leap glove because it's a quality of life design, and it's important. It's not for challenge or anything, so that's why I just purchased it, because it makes the climbing a lot more bearable. And you're going to be seeing something that you never see any Assassin's Creed player do. And this is me experimenting with dead bodies, because I'm going to use the dead bodies to lure these enemies from the guard posts, and then I'm going to kill them when their backs are turned. And I have to do this very quickly because they don't spend a lot of time inspecting the body. So this right here, I ended up bumping into this guy, and so the game activated this protocol for just pushing me around because he's annoyed with me. And it seems to supersede the programming for restricted areas where he's supposed to immediately attack me once he recognizes me. So that was very interesting to see. And I'm once again experimenting with the dead body. So I'm just going to take this dead body, hide behind this pillar over here, throw the dead body, lure these guys away, try to stay out of their line of sight, and then stab them from behind. And if I end up bumping into them, most likely the protocol for actually getting annoyed with me will trigger, rather than the protocol for attacking me in a restricted area. And this will allow me to take them out with just the single hidden blades. Obviously, you'll want to be using the lock-on to your advantage in order to designate which target you want to pick. And I don't know why I'm talking about it like you're going to be doing this, and I don't recommend doing this. I mean, I know people might say, oh, this is like what Tynar does, this is like what Seraphim 17 does with these really stupid ideas for restrictions, but I don't think it's that stupid. I think it's a very interesting idea, and it helps you understand how dead bodies work, because even when the enemies don't have line of sight, like they aren't directly looking at the dead body, if there is no obstruction between an enemy and a dead body, even when the enemy isn't looking at the dead body, they'll know that a dead body is there, and they'll go and investigate. And this is very important to note, because if you're in situations where you kill a guy, he falls down, becomes a dead body, and there are other enemies around, this can be problematic. And you'll understand what I mean when I talk about line of sight in relation to a dead body. So right here, I kill this guy, and then I kill this next guy over here. And then the two guys that are stationed at that checkpoint, I'm going to lure them with this body. So you'll notice they're not looking at me, but as soon as the dead body comes into view, like there's nothing in between themselves and the dead body, they'll recognize it and they'll start to come over here. Very strange that it works this way. And I'm just going to kill this guy. And I bumped into him, but for some reason it didn't trigger the programming where he's supposed to be annoyed with me. I'm guessing because the guy I killed, he was the one that bumped into him. I didn't bump into him. And right here, I'm going to do the same thing to lure these two gunners over here. And because I don't have double hidden blaze, I'm not going to be able to air assassinate them, so I'm going to take a risk and be in this guy's line of sight. He's not going to be able to detect me fast enough, and whenever the enemies in these checkpoints go into the red state of the social status icon, where it hasn't partially filled up yet, they will not leave the checkpoints. Normally what happens with like normal enemies in the world is when the social status icon goes red and you immediately break line of sight, they will go and investigate your last known position, but not the guys at the checkpoint. So that's why those guys weren't trying to investigate my last known position when I was trying to kill those two gunners. But having done all that, I then used my throwing knives to eliminate those guys just to finish it off. And yeah, that was a pretty fun mission. And I feel like it's practical. I feel like there is a bit of smart tactics involved. I'm stealing this from Tynar because I'm actually using smart tactics in a way that actually feels right compared to that idiot. And it was pretty fun. I enjoyed doing that, but you don't have to do that. Just it's far better to use your ranged weapons to get rid of them because it's a lot faster. But dead bodies could potentially be helpful in case you don't have any ranged weapons when you start this. Because a lot of times when I start these memories, I never really think to restock on ammunition for my pistol and my throwing knives. So I just go in with not a lot of ammunition. And so that's why I often resort to these kind of methods. But, you know, it wasn't because of that. It was just because I just wanted to try something a little different, just to add a bit more challenge to the mission. And lo and behold, it was a pretty fun mission. But this one is pretty simple. You just got to make sure you take out these guys when they're not looking at you. And I don't know why these guys aren't investigating the dead bodies. I'm guessing because they're of a different clan. Like, these are French soldiers, whereas those guys are Borgia guards. And because these guys are mission-specific, the open world guards aren't doing anything about it. Maybe it's because of that. Also, I find it very strange how, even though these are technically French soldiers, they say the exact same lines as the Borgia guard, so you can hear them speaking Spanish even though they're supposed to be French soldiers. I kind of wish they were a little bit clever and they just added like French dialogue for these enemies just so they stood out, but they just gave them a reskin. Whatever, this is still a really fun sequence. But now you just gotta take out these guys. You gotta make sure you don't lose any health squares during this mission. And that's it. And now for this one, you have to beat the mission in less than 5 minutes. And the hardest part is actually assassinating the Baron de Valois, because the hardest part is actually getting to him, because the guards are stationed in such a way where the path isn't immediately clear as to how you are supposed to get to him. But then I remembered from Laser's Brotherhood retrospective video that when he assassinated the Baron de Valois in his video, he came from the left-hand side. So I took the same path like he did, and it paid off in the end. But you gotta time this just right, because there is a guy right over there looking at me, and he's moving. And he's not gonna be able to detect me fast enough because I'm walking. If you go into high profile by just running or sprinting or just holding R2 in general, the enemies will spot you faster. But he turns away. I'm going to assassinate this guy, and then I'm going to parkour over to that building and then air assassinate the Baron de Valois. And this will be the end of the sequence. You know, you don't really realize it until you replay these missions, but the missions in these sequences are very short. And you know, this game, it does introduce the ability to replay memories, which was absent in Assassin's Creed 2. Like, Assassin's Creed 1 gave you the ability to replay memories, but Assassin's Creed 2 didn't. And then they brought it back in Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. I'm guessing because of the full sync objectives, because why else would they include it? Because when you look at the missions as a whole, each memory, they don't feel long enough to adhere to the golden rule of mission length when it comes to main missions. And I feel like the way you're supposed to interpret the memories is that they're just submissions within the actual main mission. Like, the actual main mission is the sequences, and then the actual submissions, like the actual memories that you're playing, like this one, contained within the sequences, they're objectives within the actual main missions, which are the sequences. So when you're interpreting the actual mission length in terms of the golden rule for actual main mission length, you're supposed to interpret it from the sequence length rather than from the memory length. That's how I've always interpreted it. And because of the fact that you're supposed to interpret this way, it does invalidate the replay memory function, because why would you ever want to replay a very short mission and not replay a very long mission? Of course, I assume it's just there because there are those people that like replaying short missions, or they're doing content for their videos. Like, I, in particular, want the ability to replay certain Homestead missions. Like, for instance, there's one Homestead mission in Assassin's Creed 3 where you have to defend the Weaver. Like, I don't remember what her name is. I think her name is Ellen, the Weaver, but you have to defend her from her ex-husband. And I feel like it's a very fun mission to go through, and it sucks that you can't replay those kind of memories in Assassin's Creed 3. You can only replay main missions and side missions, but not those kind of missions. So, yeah, I don't know how I really feel about the ability to replay missions in these games. It just feels like the replay mission function is there to justify the full sync objectives in case you fail them, but not really for anything else. And I honestly feel like the good Assassin's Creed games are a lot more fun to go through when you replay them from the beginning, and you're getting all the additional cutscenes, all the modern day stuff, and you're getting all the side activities just active in the world, rather than just replaying them after you've beaten all of them. I don't feel like it's as like magnificent an experience compared to just going through the game from the beginning to the end. And when a game makes you want to start from the beginning and go all the way to the end, and just the typical mission structure, if it was like your first playthrough, that I feel is really good design right there. Maybe not really good, but just good design, because obviously there are arguments against this belief, and I can totally understand those arguments. But with Assassin's Creed 2 and Brotherhood, and I would also say with Revelations as well, even Assassin's Creed 3, like, I would gladly go through those games from the beginning all the way to the end. Like, I'm just going through them like it's my first playthrough. Like, I'm on a new save file, basically, because I feel like it's a more enjoyable experience than just simply replaying the memories. Minus Assassin's Creed Revelations, because Assassin's Creed Revelations has the best missions to replay, in my opinion. But this mission right here, the full sync objective is you need to use your assassin recruits to kill the designated targets. And all of this is just one massive tailing mission where you're just tailing Micheletto on horseback, and then you're having to navigate these ruins. This one's a bathhouse, but you're having to navigate these areas just to keep up with him. And then this leads into the assassinations of the guards that are receiving the costumes. So that's how this goes. I know a lot of people don't like the tailing missions. I understand why, and Assassin's Creed 4 suffers from this problem with tailing missions because that game has probably the most amount of tailing missions ever in a game, but it's a damn sight better than the quest structure of Assassin's Creed Origins and Odyssey. And like, they level gated those games to death so much that you were practically forced to go through a bunch of mindless side quests to be of the right level to do the main story. And so the main story just feels lost within this bloated mission structure system. And you're just questioning where exactly you are in the main story. There's no sense of direction. There's no sense of focus with the way they structured the missions in Origins and Odyssey. Same with Valhalla as well. And with Valhalla, though, what they did as sort of a false solution to this issue with side missions is they bloated Assassin's Creed Valhalla's main missions by designating side missions as main missions, so that you were being fooled by the idea of playing main missions when in actuality they were side missions just called main missions. That's what they went for with Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and that game is bloated to death that you have to wonder what's even the point, and are they even trying to tell a story at this point? Like, why do you try to ruin a very focused, contained story by forcing the player to partake in side activities? or by playing through main missions that are structured just like side missions. It doesn't make any fucking sense at all. I don't understand the logic in what they're doing. And the only logical thing about it is it's there to contribute to their microtransaction system and also to their live service system. I mean, I don't think Odyssey and Valhalla are classified as live service models. I mean, I don't know the exact definition of what a live service game is, but it totally feels like it with Odyssey and Valhalla. And the bloated gameplay experience is just there to pad out the game's runtime, to force you to partake in it, because it's almost like subliminal messaging for the AC fans, like the bad AC fans who just take everything Ubisoft gives out of their hands, like they're just a bunch of dogs just licking your hand like crazy. And that's just what passes for content in the minds of all these dumb AC fans. And I cannot believe there are people that support Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I mean, with Valhalla, I can kind of understand some of the moments where there's positivity with Valhalla, because, you know, I did like Basim, even though a lot of people hate Basim with the way he was done. But, you know, the times when I was with Basim and I was hearing his lifestyle as a hidden one, I thought it was very intriguing. And then the betrayal when he actually betrays you and Sigurd, I was flabbergasted by that. Like, I felt betrayed. Like, the sense of betrayal really was set in stone for me when I just saw Basim behaving how he was in that final story mission of the game. Although not really the final one, because there is, like, additional story content after that, but it feels more like an epilogue than anything else. And I'm very interested to see what they do with Basim in Assassin's Creed Mirage. I mean, I know Mirage is going to be a bad game, and it'll most likely fuck the lore up even more with Assassin's Creed Mirage. But Basim, maybe there's something interesting right there. I don't know. But I shouldn't hope for anything from Ubisoft, because Ubisoft's a shit company. Don't support them. But we've just climbed up the Colosseum, and this full sync objective, we have to only kill the gunners. We cannot kill anyone else. It's a very simple full sync objective, and it's just cool to climb the Colosseum. I mean, Rome is honestly the best city ever introduced in an Assassin's Creed game. I also like Constantinople. I would say Constantinople is my second favorite city in all of the Assassin's Creed games. But returning to Rome, the way they've actually built Rome, like each of the buildings actually feels unique for one another and doesn't feel so copy and paste. And then you have like the different identities to each of the districts. You have the countryside district, you have the city districts, you have the poor districts, you have the rich districts. And just the way they open up to you when you go through the sequences of the game, I think it's environmental storytelling done really well. And it helps remove any sense of environmental fatigue. Like, the locations feel so varied, and you always feel like you've seen, like, something completely different, even though you've seen that thing a million times. Like, when you see, like, the same location over and over again, you don't realize you've seen the same location over and over again. Like, there are times where I end up, like, stumbling upon a building that I've probably seen, like, a million times, and it just feels new to me because of the times where I just returned to Assassin's Creed Brotherhood after a long duration. And Ubisoft definitely built this game to last. Same with Revelations. I mean, the replay value associated with these games, it's on a whole other level, I would say. At least in my opinion. Oh, and also right here, we have to stop La Volpe from getting to Machiavelli, so we have to not swim. And I'm just surprised that Ezio came to that deduction that La Volpe was about to kill Machiavelli. Like, at no point during the previous missions or the sequence did we ever focus on La Volpe. I mean, there was that first mission in the beginning, but there was nothing to indicate that La Volpe would actually go after Machiavelli and just try to kill him. And, like, why now does Ezio have that thought that La Volpe might be trying to kill Machiavelli? And how has La Volpe not already done so? I mean, we spent how long tailing Micheletto? How has La Volpe not killed Machiavelli already? I think it's one of the silliest parts of Assassin's Creed Brotherhood storytelling, this whole idea of Machiavelli potentially being a traitor, and the way La Volpe is just adamant in his beliefs that Machiavelli is a traitor. I think it's just really silly. But look at this, like, he's seconds away from trying to kill Machiavelli. It's too funny. And then this part is where Machiavelli reveals that he was the one that brought Ezio to Roma. He was the one who blew up the Castel Sant'Angelo to allow Ezio to escape. He's the one that brought the mercenaries around when he was trying to escape from the theater. I mean, the part where he brought Ezio to Roma, I mean, why didn't he immediately tell Ezio that was the case when they first met in Roma? I don't understand that. But I've reached the end of my recording, so I'll see you guys in a second. Okay, so the beginning of Sequence 8 will task us with infiltrating the Castel Sant'Angelo, and infiltrating the Castel Sant'Angelo is very simple. For some reason, though, during this mission, there is a habit for the enemies to spawn out of the blue. It's almost like the draw distance is a little weird in this mission, and you'll see it when I get to the next objective marker, because for some reason, when I'm moving along these ramparts, a guard just appears out of nowhere, and the same happens with another guard. It's very odd, but it won't be so much of a big deal as long as you memorize when exactly this phenomenon happens. But yeah, it's right over here. So when you climb this building and you go all the way... Oh, I don't know where that guy came from as well. That was very weird. This mission's very buggy. I don't know why. But see, he comes out of nowhere. I don't know what's up with that. And then ahead of me, on that roof over there, there should be another guy that just spawns out of the blue. Yep, there he is. Yeah, that's weird. Like, I don't know why this draw distance issue happens with this particular mission. It's a very unique circumstance where one mission just seems to present with this very strange bug. I don't know why this is the case, but it's only these guys that we have to deal with before we get inside, and then there are a handful of guards on the inside. So, yeah, this infiltration's pretty simple. But since I talked about Machiavelli in the previous part to this walkthrough, I do find it very strange that the game classes him as an assassin, because if you've seen some of the beliefs that Machiavelli had in our world, they don't really line up with what it means to be an assassin. If anything, Machiavelli seems to hate humanity in our world, and he also believes in, like, order and, like, suppression, I would say. At least that's how it came across to me. I don't really know the basics to Machiavellianism. I think that's what it's called. But it profiles more like Templar than actual assassin, so I wonder why Ubisoft chose to make Machiavelli an assassin when it doesn't exactly coincide with how he was in the real world. Like, I think Machiavelli is really the only character in this game whose real world counterpart is kind of a polar opposite to how he is in this game. So I think it's very interesting to note that. And speaking of characters, I question why exactly Ezio chose to spare Micheletto's life, because Micheletto is the executioner working for Cesare. I mean, he's the right-hand man to Cesare, and I think in the database entries, he did take care of Cesare in his youth, I believe. I could be making that up, but that's just what it feels like to me. And all Ezio has to say is he who is the cause of someone else becoming powerful is the agent of his own destruction. And I get that. I understand that messaging, but I just don't understand why it's applied to Micheletto out of the blue. I mean, Ezio has killed similar people to Micheletto, but why was it so different with him? And because of the fact that Micheletto just manages to survive because of this really strange change in the writing style, this is what allows him to free Cesare when he's captured at the end of Sequence 8. And I need to talk about this because the events of Brotherhood in this game are out of order, because it's played out in the game, like after Sequence 8, that Cesare escapes and Ezio discovers that Cesare escaped in the apple. And this is what causes him to go to Navarre in order to kill Cesare, but that's not actually what happens. What really happens is that Cesare is arrested. Ezio finds a vision in the apple detailing Cesare's escape and a later one in Spain, and so he goes to deal with Cesare, and he finds Cesare escaping but doesn't kill him for some reason. Or maybe I'm just reading it out wrong, or maybe the way Lasers explained it, there is a bit of a hole in that description. But I think what happened is Ezio goes to deal with Cesare, he finds him escaping, and I'm guessing Micheletto had a hand, and maybe he stopped Ezio from killing Cesare. I don't know the exact details, but they escape, they build up a small army, and Ezio and Machiavelli take out this small army, and then one thing occurs after another, and then eventually they eavesdrop on Cesare and Micheletto, and then Cesare is able to shoot Machiavelli, and so Ezio is forced to take Machiavelli to the doctor, and this is what allows Cesare to escape to Navarre. And it's never represented in the game. The game does a very poor job at really detailing the order of the events correctly. And you don't really notice it until you play the Da Vinci Disappearance, because you notice that in the Da Vinci Disappearance, there is no possible way that Ezio went to Navarre, then came back for the events of the Da Vinci Disappearance, because it takes place before 1507, and 1507 is when Ezio goes to deal with Cesare and Navarre for Sequence 9. Oh, and I forgot to mention that Ezio deposited the apple in the vault before he went to go deal with Cesare. So, yeah, I don't know why this happened with this game when they were developing the Da Vinci Disappearance and when they were just not laying out how the order of events played out. It's very confusing, but I do feel like this true order of events does undermine a lot of the build-up with Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, because if Ezio deposited the apple in the vault before he went off to deal with Cesare, why does Desmond need to waste time building up his synchronization with Ezio in order to view his memories in Navarre when it has no relevance to the apple? And if Desmond actually synced with Ezio's memories before the events in Navarre, he would not have been destabilized by Ezio's troubled state during the time he's in Navarre, and he would have been able to easily find out where the apple is in not really like a matter of hours or days, but really in a matter of minutes, it feels like. I mean, I don't know how much time passes in the modern day when you're progressing through the game, because I don't really read the emails that thoroughly enough, but this is definitely a big problem with the order of events, because it just seems like a waste of time then. You're viewing the events of Brotherhood as just a waste of time, when all Desmond has to do is just sync with Ezio's memories at that point where he's depositing the apple, because Ezio was not in any kind of troubled state when he was depositing the apple. He was only ever in a troubled state during the events of Navarre, because of course he has PTSD, or sorry, not PTSD, because PTSD symptoms are expressed a little differently in the real world compared to here. But basically, Ezio is remembering what happened during the siege of Monteregione when he's in Navarre, because it eerily mirrors that same siege. And this is what brings back those troubled memories, because, of course, he lost his Uncle Mario during that siege, and he also lost his home. Monteregione was like a home to Ezio, so it makes sense why he would be in that troubled state. But again, there is no reason for Desmond to try to improve his synchronization to view Ezio's memories during that time if Ezio deposited the apple before going to Navarre. And the game really plays it off like Ezio deposited the apple after he dealt with Cesare and Navarre. And this is what it seems like in the modern day as well. And Lucy even asked Rebecca, can you just skip forward to a later memory? And she says it's not possible. And again, Ezio's troubled state is destabilizing the memory that they need to access, but there's no way it should destabilize the memory they need to access if it occurs before Ezio went to Navarre. So that's why I'm saying this confusion with the order of events, and then considering this to be the canon order of events, presents with repercussions when it comes to the story of Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. But also, we have just obtained the Apple of Eden right now, and I do not like the Apple of Eden in this game. So the way the Apple of Eden works is not only does it drain your health the longer you use it, but there are two rings that emanate from the apple. The first ring will just cause the enemies to either cower in fear or attack their allies, or just stand still and do nothing. And then when the enemies are enveloped in the second ring, this is what will allow you to kill the enemies. But the problem is, the game didn't really build the apple in such a way that people who didn't slot into health upgrades will not have any problems with using the apple. But because I haven't slotted into the armor upgrades, because I haven't really found the point in doing so, it means that using the apple is very, very cumbersome and annoying to deal with. And that right there, that was one of the moments where I ended up dying because of my own stupidity, because I used the apple way too much, and so Ezio was in a near-death status, and that gunner was able to shoot me and kill me, so that was a big mistake. But the only possible way you're going to end these missions is to kill these enemies, and the game forces you to use the Apple of Eden. You cannot use your other weapons, and the only possible way you're going to kill these enemies is to get them inside of the second circle. And the problem is, they're moving around while you're busy trying to get them into the second circle. And if you have low health, you have less time to use the apple. And if you go into the danger state where Ezio just falls to the ground and there are ranged enemies around you, they will kill you during that animation. And this mission in particular is the hardest memory of Sequence 8 because of the amount of gunners that you have to deal with. And they are very problematic when you are trying to use the apple. And this is why I do not like the apple in this game, because it isn't designed well enough to accommodate people who go in without upgrades to their armor. If you go into these missions without upgrades to your armor to increase Ezio's health, you're gonna have a very annoying time trying to use the apple. And the whole health draining aspect, I get that Ezio is untrained in the finer aspects of the apple, and it's meant to be represented through his health draining. But when it's going to lead to a compromised gameplay experience, I feel like it's not a mutual compromise that way. But we just have the last few of these enemies, so I need to group them together, and hopefully they're close enough to me. But I see more gunners, and I need to get rid of them, or just like force them to not deal with me. And you'll notice, this other gunner right here, I put him in the ring, I use the apple, but for some reason he's still aiming at me. So how the hell is that possible? I mean, I don't exactly know when the apple's effect takes hold. Is it when, like, the moment the ring just passes over them, that's when they're affected by it? Or is it, like, the moment you release square, that's when the effect of the apple takes hold? That's when they actually succumb to the influence of whatever circle they're in at the time that you release square. I mean, it's a little confusing that way. And now we have this final part. There are no targets to kill. You are timed. I don't know how exactly the sequence ends. I think you have to kill a certain number of enemies. And I don't know if the timer is bad or if the timer is good here. I don't remember. I mean, I might have come across a situation with a timer, but it's been so long since I played Brotherhood that I don't remember what happens when the timer counts down. But what did happen here is that I killed off a certain number of enemies before the timer finished, and the mission ended. And once this mission ends, this is the end of Sequence 8, and the game will forcefully put you into Sequence 9, which I understand. But you'll see the Da Vinci disappearance after this mission, because of course this is how the timeline of events play out. And also, for the recordings of the Da Vinci disappearance, I used a different save file because I didn't want to waste time sitting through the end credits of Assassin's Creed Brotherhood credits, unfortunately. So my loot will be slightly different, but I'll still play like I'm on the first save file that I was using when I was recording the initial parts of this game. But that's that, and now we moved on to the Da Vinci disappearance. So the Borgia guards are not our primary enemy. Instead, we have this cult of Hermeticists, and they've been basically trying to gain access to a temple that has the Pythagorean unifier, a number that will basically reshape the world and suit their own beliefs, because they believe in that kind of stuff. Only what Ezio finds is actually the coordinates to the Grand Temple in Assassin's Creed 3. So this is a great example of when Assassin's Creed used to care about telling its story through multiple games, but like this game was made in 2010 and Assassin's Creed 3 wouldn't release until 2012, and they were already creating a setup for Assassin's Creed 3 back in this game. How cool is that for storytelling? Like, they had an initial goal in mind when they were constructing Assassin's Creed 3, and then Patrice Désilets left the series, and Lucy was fired from the game, and the direction of Assassin's Creed 3 feels very disconnected to the previous games. And I do agree with Lasers on this point. Like, he doesn't like Assassin's Creed 3, and I do understand why, and he really wished that Assassin's Creed 3 would be a game about Xiao Yun, who was that assassin that you saw in Assassin's Creed Embers, which was that short movie that details the last moments of Ezio's life before he ultimately passed away. And if Assassin's Creed 3 followed up on Xiao Yun, it would have made logical sense, and it would have bridged back to Ezio in some way, and it would have also connected to Desmond as well. But they just completely killed off Desmond in Assassin's Creed 3, and they killed off Juno in a comic. So everything that they set up through the Ezio trilogy is just rendered null and void with the way they handled Assassin's Creed 3 and the rest of the games. You can't even tell what the story is for the games after Assassin's Creed 3. I mean, like, what's the story now? I mean, I already discussed this before, but, like, Desmond dies, saves the world, and the Assassins and Templars are just like, guess we kill each other again. And then Assassin's Creed Valhalla tries to jarringly connect itself back to the Ezio trilogy because the world is in peril again because of the fact that Desmond turning on the machine that saved the world in 2012, the machine is working overtime. And because of this, it's affecting the magnetic field, and it's causing satellites to crash down. And it's going to lead to a global catastrophe until Layla turned it off, and she became merged with the Grey. So we know the fate of Desmond. So after he was killed in Assassin's Creed 3, his consciousness somehow ended up in the Grey, and he lost all sense of identity, and he just became known as the Reader, just with the voice of Desmond. So he lacks the identity of Desmond Miles, but he's just reading the calculations to prevent more global catastrophes. And then Layla figures out how to change the way he perceives how to prevent future world-ending events, because it's a cyclical event apparently. And I mean, I do understand the payoff they were trying to do right there, but it was a late payoff, and it had no emotional investment whatsoever. Like, so long between Assassin's Creed Brotherhood and Valhalla, and you're trying to tie up loose ends from that era of gaming. That just doesn't work. And also, there is no emotional connection between Layla and Desmond, so how can you have that kind of character payoff in the end? I mean, it doesn't work. So it just feels like they did it because, oh, people were begging for assassins back in the games again, and they looked back at the previous games and they saw this loose end that they left behind, and they just decided to satisfy it in Valhalla, even though it means absolutely nothing in the end. Aside from freeing Basim from the Grey, and he ends up back in his body somehow. That I don't understand. So Basim's body was rotted for centuries, right? There is no possible way his body should even be alive or even have the ability to move, yet somehow his body is able to move. He ends up touching the Staff of Hermes somehow, and because the Staff of Hermes has healing properties, it restores him back to his pristine condition. And that is how he's able to leave the temple, go to where Sean and Rebecca are, and then contact William Miles. I mean, I don't understand that. That makes no sense. It defies the laws of decay and decomposition, like anything like that. There is no possible way Basim should have been able to leave the Grey and actually get back into his own body and then conveniently touch the Staff of Hermes that was just on the ground. I mean, did Alethea plan for this? I mean, I don't remember what the relationship was between Basim and Alethea. I think Alethea is Basim's wife, because Basim is supposed to be the reincarnation of, who was it again? Loki? Yeah, it's supposed to be Loki, and already that doesn't make any sense, because for some reason, they make it out like there were Greek Isu and there were Norse Isu, but those cultures didn't even exist 70,000 years ago. There was no Greek culture or Norse culture back then. And also, it's established in Assassin's Creed 2 and Brotherhood that the Isu went by many names. I mean, look at Minerva, for instance. Minerva, the one Isu that we encounter in Assassin's Creed 2, and also in Assassin's Creed 3, she's not just called Minerva, she also goes by Athena. But for some reason, in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which is based on the Greek culture, when you play the Fate of Atlantis DLC, specifically Episode 3, the people in this simulation that Alethea set up in order to help Layla learn how to use the Staff of Hermes, but everything you're doing in the simulations has nothing to do with the Staff of Hermes. the inhabitants of the simulation, they're supposed to be Greek, right? But for some reason, they refer to Minerva as Minerva, which makes absolutely no sense because Minerva is the Italian/Roman interpretation of this individual. In Greek culture, she is known as Athena. So why didn't they refer to her as Athena? It doesn't make any fucking sense. And also, like, for some reason, Basim was getting hallucinations of I'm sorry, not Odin, Loki. So the Isu part of themselves was fighting with the human side of themselves within Basim and Eivor and Sigurd, and eventually Loki overtook Basim, and this is what allowed him to be reborn through Basim, pretty much. So he's no longer known as Basim, he's now known as Loki. So basically it's Loki who gets revived when Layla enters the Grey through that device. I think it's called the Yggdrasil device, yeah. So, yeah, like, everything I'm saying is just so fucking convoluted. And it doesn't line up with the lore and the canon established in the previous games. And it just goes to show that Ubisoft doesn't understand their own lore anymore. And they're just throwing ideas out the window because they can. And, you know, there are people that just believe that you have the ability to just freely do whatever the hell you want with a brand or a product, even though you set up information in the previous entries of your series. But then you might as well just discard all your work. Like, why do you bother setting up connections if you're then going to violate those connections? Or, like, these lore points in the later games? It makes no fucking sense. And it just goes to show a lack of respect towards your series. It just goes to show the haphazard, slapdash nature to everything. Just the lack of care displayed towards your brand. If you don't care about your product, you shouldn't be pumping out more versions of your product. The only reason they still pump out Assassin's Creed is just to, like, cash in on the success of the series, because Assassin's Creed has way too many fans, and too many fans that like the newer entries, and they don't understand what makes the newer entries shit and what makes the older entries really good. But sadly, that is the fan base that is directing Ubisoft to do whatever the hell they're doing. And Ubisoft doesn't even care about their fans anymore because they're just using their fans to gain money. Like, all they have to do to just build up all those pre-orders for Assassin's Creed Mirage is just showcase some iconography, some assassin things that you'll likely recognize from the previous games without showing any gameplay. And that is all it takes to get people to pre-order the game. And I just found it very, very insulting during that Ubisoft showcase where they showed Mirage and they showed that cinematic trailer. They detailed absolutely nothing else about the game, nothing related to gameplay. They just were like, oh, here's the cinematic trailer. Oh, here's some pre-orders. That's it. That's all we need because we're able to bait our gullible fans to pre-order our games. And this is what allows us to get away with shoddy workmanship and just lazily designed products. That's just the Ubisoft of this generation right now. And they are not recovering from this anytime soon. There's not going to be any change. It's impossible because Yves Guillemot is the one guiding the ship. He is the one that is directing Ubisoft to just adhere to the very abhorrent practices that they favor right now. Like, Assassin's Creed is not going to improve. Ubisoft is not going to improve as a company. Assassin's Creed is just fucked at this point. But either way, I'm still going to play Mirage just to see what it's like, because if they are stripping away the RPG aspects and they are focusing a bit more on the assassins / hidden ones, because apparently they're not allowed to say assassins anymore. Yeah, that's just like the critical issue at this point. It's whether assassins will be in the next game or not, even though it's literally called Assassin's Creed. Do you have any idea how fucking stupid that is? Do you have any idea how fucking retarded that is? An Assassin's Creed game without assassins, and people are too afraid to refer to them as assassins, and so they come up with names like Hidden Ones or the like. Like, Origins completely ruined everything with the origin of the Brotherhood. It was a terrible origin story, and Odyssey and Valhalla just ruined it even further. Yeah, there is just no end to the sheer stupidity of all this. But, going back to what I was saying about the Da Vinci disappearance, the storytelling in this game is phenomenal, and this DLC also touches upon Pythagoras, and he was a scholar that was the one that found the entrance to the temple. And also, apparently in Odyssey, he is the father of Cassandra, and he locked himself away in Atlantis only for his demigod daughter to just steal the staff from him and just kill him. Yeah, what a waste. And he's apparently like a human Isu hybrid, and this is what allows him to be very tied to mathematics and the like. And of course, it has relevance in Odyssey because that's likely how he resisted the staff's influence because of his Isu DNA. But we can't take anything that Odyssey says or shows at face value, given how much it spends violating the lore of the previous Assassin's Creed games. And I think that's precisely why Valhalla makes little to no references to Assassin's Creed Odyssey, aside from that very shit crossover between Assassin's Creed Odyssey and Valhalla, where Eivor actually interacts with Cassandra in some badly animated cutscenes, and everything that occurred there was so meaningless. I mean, they see like a piece of Eden, like they track this apple and something happens to it, but it's just such an isolated event that has no relevance to the fucking story. What's the fucking point in this crossover? Unfucking believable. Yeah, that's precisely why Odyssey doesn't get much attention in Valhalla, and it's a good choice because Origins doesn't do anything so egregious with the lore aside from the way the assassins were founded, or rather the hidden ones were founded. But yeah, I've talked about all that, but I've talked over these missions. This mission, you might have noticed something very specific with the courtesans. I hired the courtesans, and then I told them to wait. This is important. The courtesans will only go out and distract other guards if you are actually blending with them or you're pretty close to them. But if you tell them to wait and you go past a bunch of guards and then you call them, they will skip the guards. And this is important because there are guards in the way when you're trying to bring the courtesans over to the painting, and the painting's location is randomized as well. But by using this tech to my advantage, I'm able to control when the courtesans go after the guards and when the guards are able to ignore them. And I'm able to get one of the paintings easily, and then the second painting is very easy to get. And now we have this little puzzle-solving sequence, and this is a great example of Assassin's Creed diversifying its gameplay. I mean, to be honest, though, Assassin's Creed Brotherhood is really the only Assassin's Creed game that diversifies its gameplay so much. I mean, controlling the machine gun, the tank, the flying bomber, the boat, and then we have this puzzle-solving aspect right here. And then we have stuff with Subject 16's puzzles. Assassin's Creed Brotherhood's gameplay is constantly diversified, and this really allows this Assassin's Creed game in particular to stand out. And I can see why it's lauded by so many as being the best in the series. You could argue that Assassin's Creed 4 does something similar, but I don't think it's as noticeable as what Brotherhood tries to bring to the table. I mean, because the only real diversifying thing about Assassin's Creed 4, and it's still very satisfying, is the naval combat. Assassin's Creed 4 made a name for itself with its naval combat. Then they tried to make some game out of it called Skull and Bones, and that game has been in development hell for 10 years. I've never heard of a game taking 10 years, and it's still not ready yet. That's ridiculous. And to make a deal with the Singaporean government. And speaking of Singapore, Ubisoft Singapore is widely regarded as the most toxic division of Ubisoft by far. You will see a lot of gender discrimination, you'll see a lot of racism, you'll see a lot of discrepancies in the way people receive their paychecks. It's fucking terrible. It is horrible. It's probably the worst environment ever for a game developer. And I've heard of toxic work environments and like developers putting in a lot of crunch time in other companies, but nowhere near to the same degree as this. Ubisoft Singapore is the single worst gaming company ever, just based on their poor reputation alone. And it's shameful that Ubisoft could sink that low. And the sad thing is, this is a reality in the work environment because we as individuals are incapable of creating a very functional work environment because there's always people being greedy, there's always people being assholes, there's always some form of discrimination. I myself went through the exact same thing as those people in my full-time position because my employers decided to spread rumors about me just like goofing off or just focusing on school in the middle of work when I wasn't. I was focusing on the task at hand, and I was focusing on the work that was given to me. But of course, this was my first full-time job, right? So I didn't know I was supposed to be requesting work, this and that. So, there was times where I wouldn't have as much work to do, and I'm guessing my employers just took that the wrong way, and they decided to spread rumors about me. And if they wanted me out of the job, why don't you just fire me already rather than spreading all these nasty rumors? Yeah. Don't work for a military organization, guys, because the military is shit, the government is shit, and unfortunately I'm having to go back to doing a corporate position again, because, I'm hospitals, military organizations, all that kind of stuff. I still consider them to be corporations. That's exactly how it is. Like, I don't know how you define a corporation, but all this stuff with, like, the corporate dickheads and bureaucratic red tape, all this nonsense, it's the kind of crap you deal with in every single job. And I only wish I could at least find a job that aligned with my own passions, or I could at least find a job that aligned with my review capabilities. And, if my Resident Evil Village review allowed me to make money on YouTube, that would have been pretty cool. I mean, I'm not going to call that as just being the sole benefit of the review, because I put a lot of heart and soul into that review, and that's the thing that matters, not the money. But as a benefit, that would have been pretty cool, but sadly, that's not the case. And, because of the cynical nature I've developed, because of the shitty work environments I've been in, I have decided to pursue side hustle businesses like Amazon FBA, and I've been taking a course in it as well, and the guy directing the course actually feels like a human being, and there are modules I have to do, and I actually feel like I'm talking to a human being, or just hearing stuff from a human being, rather than from some professor just goofing off, or just mindlessly spouting information because they're bored with their job, this and that. I mean, all I'll say, just relaying it back to the main point I was discussing, is I understand the reality of the situation at Ubisoft Singapore, and I know that what I went through is of a lesser degree compared to what's happening at Ubisoft Singapore. And the gaming industry as a whole represents one of the most toxic work environments you could ever be in. And, very rarely do you ever come across a developer that actually understands how to create a very pleasant work environment. But Ubisoft Singapore is nothing like that, and military organizations and hospital organizations or anything like that. It just feels like they're just run by corporate dickheads who are just ready to dick you around and just throw you all over the place and just throw you under the bus and fire you on the spot. And that's exactly what Yves Guillemot has been doing with all of his employees, and he's been saying it's their fault that Ubisoft is in the pitiful situation that they're in, not holding any accountability, just as Tony Stark said. I realize I have been a part of a system that is comfortable with zero accountability. I really love that whole speech that he did in Iron Man 1 when he comes back from Gulmira and he's talking in that press conference. That was one of the best moments of Iron Man 1, and it relates greatly to the real world. But getting back to the main point, yeah, Ubisoft is a very shit company, and, it's nothing new with this kind of toxic work environment nonsense. But we are now in Sequence 9, and this is where we are going to be doing this one-time set piece of traveling to a very unique location to finish off a final boss, which is Cesare Borgia. And it's not really much of a boss fight because Cesare fights like any normal guard, but he has a lot of life. And the way you'll want to speed it up is to just use the gun. And if you've been slotting into gun pouches and you have a lot of ammunition, you are going to embarrass Cesare because it only takes 3 shots from your pistol to cue the quick-time event that allows you to chip away at Cesare's armor every time. And he will just go down in a hurry. And it's just a shame that Assassin's Creed has decided to focus on gamey boss designs and bosses having a ridiculous amount of life, even though it doesn't match their human capabilities. Like, somehow these human bosses are given absurd amounts of HP that feels like they're the Terminator, and it makes no fucking sense. And these are some of the most shallow and repetitive, uninspired boss fights you'll ever get in an Assassin's Creed game in the newer entries. And they experimented with bosses a bit with, I think it was with Assassin's Creed Syndicate, because they had that boss fight against Starek, who was kind of the final boss fight, although he fought a lot like the guards, so I can't really count that. But I think it was when Origins came out that they decided to experiment with boss fights, and every single boss in Origins was shit. There wasn't a single good one. And then every single one of Odyssey's boss fights was bad because of the grindy gameplay and the uninspired and unimaginative moveset of the bosses, and with how much you were just spamming your overpower abilities. I will say, though, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, I would say that Basim is probably my favorite fight in the game because of how unique it is, because it feels like you're fighting an assassin, and he uses a lot of the techniques that the hidden ones use, and he throws throwing knives at you, he runs around, he's very evasive, and he has a believable amount of life, I would say. I mean, the first phase is a little bit weird because you have to let Basim damage you after you deal a certain amount of damage to him, and then you're able to do the next couple of phases. But overall, I think it's a pretty cool fight, and I do like the music as well. It's definitely the one time Assassin's Creed Valhalla feels grounded within the assassin/hidden one mythos, with the kind of boss fight that was given with Basim. Of course, then again, can you really say that? Because you're actually fighting Loki, because Loki has fully overtaken Basim's personality, and so you're practically fighting an Isu. It's just he's using hidden one's techniques for some reason. And I find it very strange how when Loki escapes the Grey and he occupies Basim's body, he just chooses to connect with the assassins of the modern day. Like, why does he not betray them? Because it feels like when Basim was overtaken by Loki, he betrayed the ideals of the Hidden Ones, and so he disconnected himself. It felt like he was just using the Hidden Ones for his own agendas, but he's still going to connect with the modern-day assassins for some reason. Like, I don't really understand that. It doesn't really make any sense, and I don't understand what his motivations are. I mean, it's clear he has some ulterior motives, but why bother pondering this idea when his story is not going to contribute in any sort of way to the progression of Assassin's Creed's story? And with Ubisoft doing Assassin's Creed Infinity with that Infinity Hub, and they have like 3 or 4 other Assassin's Creed games in the works, it's clear that Assassin's Creed is not going to end. So pondering anything involving Loki's ulterior motives, it isn't worth it, because we know that this series is never going to end, or if it does, the only way it'll end is if Ubisoft falls apart. And it's clear that they are struggling from so much in terms of financial problems and poor leadership. And they have 7 games like completely canceled, and then you have that Skull and Bones game that's just completely delayed, and they haven't delivered a good product in almost a decade, and they've been busy chasing trends. Like, it feels like it's the perfect storm for Ubisoft's downfall, and they had the opportunity to merge with I believe it was Microsoft. I think Microsoft offered to buy Ubisoft, or was it someone else? I don't remember, but Yves Guillemot declined selling Ubisoft to this big company because he wants to keep the company for himself, because Ubisoft is pretty much a brainchild of the Guillemot family line, basically. So he wants it to span his entire family generation, but it's clear he's so deluded and so like self-centered and just unable to see what's in front of him that he doesn't realize he's leading his company to doom, pretty much. So Ubisoft is likely going to fall apart and completely collapse and just close as a company that just failed, and Assassin's Creed will finally end, and there will not be a definitive conclusion to the series. That's just what I'm predicting is going to be the case, and I feel like Lasers is going to say the same thing as me, and everything that Lasers said about Assassin's Creed Odyssey came true. And pretty much what he said about Valhalla came true as well. I mean, aside from a couple of minor moments, but all the major moments he just predicted to be true because he knows Ubisoft like the back of his hand. And if he says the same things that I'm saying, then most likely it means that what he's saying is true. And it won't be that surprising. So, yeah, Ubisoft is definitely sending itself to hell right now. And this series is going absolutely nowhere. And we have just done Sequence 9, and we are now on this final modern-day sequence. It's pretty cool how Assassin's Creed Brotherhood only forces you out of the Animus at the start and at the end, and you're free to leave the Animus whenever you want to explore the modern day. So I find that to be pretty cool. And while I was busy coming up with this statement, I just realized something. If you remember, after you kill Cesare in sequence 9, it shows that cutscene of Ezio placing the apple, and then it shows the Colosseum. Remember, guys, Ezio deposited the apple before he went to confront Cesare, right? Yet, for some reason, during the cutscene that shows Ezio leaving the Colosseum after depositing the apple, the Colosseum looks different. Yet, this event where Ezio deposited the apple occurred before the Da Vinci disappearance, yet if we stop by the Colosseum looks nothing like how it was during that cutscene where Ezio was leaving after he deposited the apple. So that just seems like a very strange inconsistency, but it's a pretty big thing as well because it makes no sense. It's a major structure with the Colosseum, and somehow they miss this. And there are a couple of minor discrepancies like this. Like, for instance, in one of the Christina memories for Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, specifically the third one, for some reason, Ezio is wearing the Medici cape when he meets Christina, but that's not possible because Ezio had not even received the Medici cape in the year that he met Christina during that memory. He received the Medici cape after that third memory, so I question why that happened, although it's just a minor thing. You can easily miss that kind of thing, but maybe they were just looking over some old like modeling for AC2 Ezio, and they just used that one because it just felt right with the time period he was in, and they neglected the cape. That's probably it. But the whole Colosseum thing is very confusing. And speaking of landmarks, you want to know something else that Assassin's Creed Odyssey does? Assassin's Creed Odyssey breaks history entirely. There is a massive historical violation. Remember how Assassin's Creed was always like, oh, history is our playground, oh, we respect history? Well, for some reason, in Legacy of the First Blade, Episode 3 for Assassin's Creed Odyssey, there is a time lapse that shows Darius, the first wielder of the Hidden One, taking Cassandra's child to Egypt, and the way they show the passage of time is not by showing years in the corner like what happens in sequence 8 of Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, but what they do is they show the pyramids of Giza being built even though they were already built 2,000 years before that moment. So how the fuck did Ubisoft, a company that is supposed to be well-versed with history, cause this massive historical violation by showing the pyramids being built 2,000 years after they were already built? What the fuck is that? That's so fucking retarded on so many levels. And do you have any idea how long that is? The pyramids were as old to Cleopatra of Egypt as she is to us. So showing the pyramids being built in 300 BCE is the same as showing Cleopatra wandering the streets of New York in 2012. It's just as egregious as that. And I can't believe they did that with the pyramids of Giza in Assassin's Creed Odyssey. That's just how fucked the entire development team is at Ubisoft, and they're going to be making like basic historical errors like that. What the fuck? But anyway, this video is about to end very soon, but we just have this minor platforming sequence, and you have to make sure that you grab onto the right levers to create the platforms. So you have to go left, right, and left for those switches, and you'll be able to gain access to Yapple. Juno will take control of Desmond and force him to kill Lucy, because again, the game is trying to play it off like Lucy's a Templar, even though it makes no sense. And that will be the end of Brotherhood. So this is the end of my Assassin's Creed Brotherhood 100% full sync walkthrough of the main missions. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.
It is done.